Guest in studio, no other than His Excellency of Augustus Jaspert. Viewers, today we talk all things BVI Airways, racism, as well as our response to COVID-19 here in the beautiful British Virgin Islands. So all that and so much more when we return.
Is business slow, cash flow down, hosting an upcoming event? We can help. Advertise with 284 Media and take your business or event to the next level by enhancing your present marketing and messaging strategies. Allow our team of experts to create a personalized ad that sets your business apart from all the rest. This could be your business or event. So, what are you waiting for? Contact our marketing team at 284media at cctbvi.com. Advertising with us works.
As promised, viewers, we are here with His Excellency, Mr. Augustus Jaspert, joining us in studio. He is the Governor of the British Virgin Islands. And by the way, this is his inaugural visit to 284 Media. So welcome, Mr. Jaspert.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to be here.
All right, so lots to get into today. But before we dive in, I have to ask, how have you been coping with the impact of COVID-19 personally, your family? I'm sure you're stuck at home with the kids doing homework, which might be a bit unprecedented. So just tell us about your experience.
Well, in a way, when something like COVID-19 happens, for me as governor, I have my role and I have my job to do. But also, I also have, as many other people in the territory, the most important job, which is being a dad and being a part of a family. So I have two young children. They are 8 and 12. They were two boys. So we were locked down all together with them as well. They've been pretty good. I won't say having two young boys is always easy, locking them inside the house. For those parents out there, can I applaud them for all that they've been doing. But we're doing well as a family, and it's given me an insight into the challenges that others will have as well, working, keeping a family going, educating children at the same time, and balancing all of the different pressures. But we're doing well. Thank you for asking.
Awesome, awesome. So let's head straight into it. Now, BVI Airways, certainly one of the most controversial projects handled by local government, more specifically the NDP government, and that Auditor General's report was a critical part in identifying what really happened and who's responsible, to say the least. And now almost 3 years after, we see a full criminal investigation being launched into the alleged mismanagement of $7.2 million. Now, back in April, Premier Foy filed a formal complaint to the UK, accusing you essentially of failing to bring that report before Cabinet within the statutory required period. Firstly, did you meet that protocol requirement?
Yes, completely. So just to clarify and to explain a bit about how these things work. Firstly, to put on record my thanks to the Auditor General. Her and her team have done excellent work, as they always do, on looking at some of the most difficult issues and most difficult projects. And this was a very good example of that. I received the report on the 7th of February. That's when it came into my office. Actually, by the time I got to look at it, it was a bit later, but the 7th of February is the date it was received in my office. And under the Audit Act, there's 3 months period for it to then come to be laid for the House of Assembly. I took it to Cabinet. It was actually the first Cabinet we had on the 23rd of April, after we had had a break in cabinets because we were dealing with COVID. So we had about a month break. We had special cabinets from the 18th, I think, from mid-March through to the 23rd of April.
Okay.
And that gave enough time for it to be considered by Cabinet, and then still, and it's out of my hands, it's up to the Leader of Government Business, and it's up to the House for how the House schedules its work, but it was given and discharged within the correct timescales.
All right, so we understand now that it's now before the Royal Virgin Islands Police Force, and that happens also to fall under your portfolio security. Can you tell us what's the next step? Like, what happens if the said characters, for example, identified, are found guilty?
Well, it's a live criminal investigation now, so one thing I or others we can't do is to comment on that criminal investigation. So I won't get involved in that part of it. The police operate independently in terms of their investigation. In general terms, what happens on any investigation that the police would investigate, and if there is evidence, then they may pass that to the Director of Public Prosecutions for her to consider before anything may come to court. But I can't comment more on something that is a live police investigation. It's important that the Commissioner is given the time and the space to undertake that fully. What we have done as a National Security Council is ensure that we're giving the Commissioner the expertise and the resource to support that. So at the National Security Council we agreed a specialist team to support the Commissioner and advise on this case. Not going into the details of it, but because of the nature of this is quite a complex case, and so my role is more to ensure that the police have the resources and the ability to take forward their functions, but not to be involved in investigations.
All right, so now recently we saw a motion being moved in the House of Assembly regarding that very case by 2 members, moved and seconded. Of course, it did not follow through, but what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that was warranted at all?
Well, I make a habit of not commenting on what's happening in the House. It's up to the House to decide what their priorities are. It's up to the House to decide what they wish to discuss. My priorities at the moment are very much keeping the territory safe from COVID-19, keeping us safe going into the hurricane season, and on all of the areas that are under my group and my responsibilities, and making sure that we deliver excellent public service, we improve the security, improve the justice of the territory. But really it's a question for the House as to how they choose their priorities and what they want to discuss, not something for me to comment on.
Okay, Mr. Jaspert, what do you think this whole BVI Airways debacle so far, what do you think it has taught us as a territory?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's leaving aside the specifics of BVI Airways, where, as I said, there'll be a criminal investigation, or there is a criminal investigation. Actually, if we look at this report and we look at other reports and we look back at the lessons that we've learned, I think there's some quite serious issues about how we as a territory ensure consistently there is good financial management, there is transparency, there is strong accountability, our contracts are done properly, we take legal advice, we make sure that every single dollar we spend on behalf of the public, we do it in the best possible way. Now this is an example where, as the Auditor General's report concludes, that wasn't the case. But if we apply that going forward, for me the most important thing is how do we ensure those lessons are learned? How do we improve the standards of good governance? How do we improve transparency, accountabilities, both in our laws, and you've heard me talk before about things like an Integrity Act, getting the Procurement Act moving, Ministerial Code, but also in our practice. How do we actually ensure that we follow those laws consistently, and all of the time the driving thing, anybody in public office, the driving thing that I know the vast majority of our public servants are driven by is, are we delivering a good job for the public, and are we doing that in a way that is transparent, accountable, and delivering good value for money for our services? And that for me is the most important thing we take from this report, and that's something I'll be working on with the Premier, with the Cabinet, with the leaders of the public service, to say how do we take the lessons from this, and how do we ensure that we're not here again reading another audit report, because this isn't the first. Let's try and make it the last where we read it and we say, this type of practice is still happening.
Well, I do think that those are the sentiments echoed by majority of the territory, so we definitely can agree on that. Now moving on to COVID-19, now the coronavirus pandemic has crippled the world over, not just here in the British Virgin Islands. This pandemic was unprecedented and really foreshadowed a lot of our industries, but across the world as well. If we could piggyback just a little bit, earlier this year we lost a resident to the horrors of COVID-19. We can all recall also the dreadful level of discrimination, Mr. Jaspert, around her death. And even now, as nationals are returning to the BVI, residents are returning to the BVI, still a very high level of discrimination. Now, I know initially you did say that police are looking into the matter, that first case, as it relates to discrimination. Can you say what came out of that, and what are your general thoughts towards the recent spew of discrimination?
Well, firstly, just in terms of COVID-19, it's been a really difficult and tough period for everyone in the territory, and it still is. And whilst we think about returning a bit more to normal, we need to remember we are not in normal, and we're not going to be in that for a while, and we shouldn't be complacent. We're sitting in a studio where we're socially distanced. I'm not next to you around the same table. Everything we do, we have to adapt. But I'm also very cognizant it's led to a lot of hardship for people. It's led to people losing their jobs. It's led to businesses facing extreme challenges. It's led to families being separated when they're outside of the territory. It's led to people not being able to travel and to connect, or students being home from school. All of these things are really, really important and are going to leave deep marks, and we need to make sure that we support our communities through it. For me, I've seen BVI, when the times get tough, we do best when we pull together. And I remember, and I will always, although it was a difficult time, I will always be lifted up by the experience in 2017. Now, we would never want to have those hurricanes again, but when I first arrived, in 2 weeks here, we had those horrible two ladies came to trash the islands in terms of Irma and Maria.
Yes.
But I saw how every single member of the community pulled together. People weren't saying, are you belonger, non-belonger, are you white, are you black, are you down island, or I don't like the term, are you, but whatever the terms that people are using, they weren't questioning that. They were saying, how can I help? Can I help you clear your yard? Can I help you if you need food? Can I help you if you need water? Have you got somewhere to stay? Come and stay at mine. And I think that's an important thing, that we know that's deep inside of us. We know we're all the same. We know there is only one race, the human race. We can talk a bit later maybe about the important matters around Black Lives Matters and shining a light on discrimination there as well. But as you asked about this, we should, I believe, constantly question, all of us, about ensuring there's no discrimination in our society in any way. And that to me is a very, very important issue.
All right, so as we examine the global travel industry, we do know that the BVI is dependent, one of our main economic pillars being tourism in the British Virgin Islands. But as we pan across the world, just 2 days ago, Europe said they're going to ban U.S. travel. Also, recently, just yesterday, I think, BVI CCHA making a very strong call on government to provide a timeline as it relates to the reopening of the tourism industry. I think it's one thing for us to have our borders closed, but not knowing when it will reopen, I think is breeding a lot of anxiety in the industry. And like you said, a lot of persons are finding themselves, businesses, in financial trouble. As it relates to the reopening of our borders for tourism, what do you think are the real prospects? What are we looking at as it relates to maybe some key performance indicators that will say, hey, we're ready to reopen and reboot the tourism industry? Thank
you. Well, it's a good question, and one that we are constantly addressing and thinking through at Cabinet. And as you know, we've opened the borders in a limited way. And some of the conditions around that were, are we able to safely bring people back in? Have we got quarantine facilities? Are we able to ensure that they're either in a home and secure, or there's a government quarantine facility? And that's allowed us to bring, or to open up for bringing belongers and residents back. But I'm very, very conscious, and we're all very conscious at Cabinet, about the difficulties and the hardships the borders being shut more widely mean, particularly for those whose lives are here. Many on work permit holders who have been here many, many years, and we want to get them back as soon as we can. And those are active discussions that are going on. It's also, there's work which is for the Minister of Tourism more to talk about, but work that's going on about the protocols for how do we ensure that we can open up in a safe way. One of the things, though, that we've also done is during this period have built up our health system more. And I'm hugely grateful for the support from the United Kingdom on this. We've had about 250,000 items of kit, of medical equipment, come from the United Kingdom. Everything from testing machines, so we can now test on island within 45 minutes. These are rapid, they're called Jaspert, a rapid testing machine. We've got more test kits. So we've had more ventilators. We hope we never need to use them, but we've had more medical equipment should we be there. So building up our health system and our capabilities to test, assess, whilst then we put in place the protocols and the arrangements to ensure people can come back safely. But it is an area that I hope we can say, as a government, can say more about soon. All right, I know you mentioned a second ago 250,000 pieces of equipment in support from the United Kingdom. Also, the government recently calling and reaching out to the United Kingdom for financial assistance. And of course, the UK did say that the BVI must basically use its own resources. We've seen some of that started with Social Security and a few other arms. But is there anything else that you can comment on that the UK can do for us at this point as it relates to financial assistance? Well, what the UK has said, it's done a few things. So the UK, as I said, has been focusing on how do we support each territory, and here in particular, building up our health system, as that was the primary main focus initially. It's also said for BVI, but also for every other territory as well that's affected, it said it's open for a discussion on what it can do to support financially. That discussion hasn't yet happened, but I hope it does. And the plans, and the first question is for BVI, and quite rightly, it's not for the UK to say this is how we're going to manage the situation in BVI. It's up to BVI ourselves to say this is what we plan to do. This is our plan. This is where we need support, and this is how we would like to go forward. So the UK has said to BVI, as it has to the other territories, let's share your plan, let's talk through that plan and have a discussion on the back of that. And that's probably the first or the next step that needs to happen.
All right, so based on your seat in cabinet and that plan that we are referring to, how much more do you think we can do for ourselves as a territory based on the reserves that we do have?
Well, it's really for the Premier and Minister of Finance to talk about those aspects. I know we have, it's public documents in terms of the budget, we have a good level of reserves. Obviously the economy is affected, and that means obviously revenue is affected, so we need to spend and spend wisely. But we do have good reserves, we do have borrowing capability ourselves, should we need to use it. We also have the protocols for effective financial management. You might have heard a lot about these. These are essentially the same guidelines in a way that each territory has. And what these do, they set a framework for ensuring that we spend in a managed way. So the fact that we've got the healthy reserves and we've got the ability to borrow, part of that is because the protocols have said, you know, when the sun is shining, build up your reserves so that when it's raining, you've got some money if you need. And so I think we're in a position where we do have that, but it's up to the Minister of Finance and Premier really to give more of those details.
All right, so we are dealing with racism, and this is I think it has drawn some parallels to the pandemic itself, COVID-19, as it relates to not only shining light on what's going on across the world, and most recently, Black Lives Matter, a protest in the BVI highlighted a lot of ills within our very community, but we see a lot happening as it relates to a Black revolution across the world, really standing up and against racism, and not just Black people, but in general, the world holding hands and standing in solidarity, saying this has to end. Now, most recently, the Church of England, Lloyds of London, as well as the Bank of England, they all made statements apologizing for their roles in slavery, obviously inspired by the Black Lives Movement. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Jaspert?
So firstly, in terms of the Black Lives Movement, this is really, really important. And it is, seeing the horrific murder, and that's what it was, the murder of George Floyd, that's triggered something, and it's triggered something that is vital, that is listened, and progress happens to. It shouldn't take a murder to do that, but it's important that people actively say, not just we don't like racism, but actually actively are anti-racist and challenge it. I went along to the march with my family on Saturday, and I should actually say to the organisers of it, I thought they did a fantastic job. Some of our brightest young people in the territory who pulled the community together. And it was everybody from across all different communities in the territory just saying, this is wrong. This is not what we want to be. And we stand up against it, against racism. And I'm a white person. I can't claim to understand how a black person will feel on everything. But I can say I stand with you. And I can say I'm against any form of racism, and focusing on, as the Black Lives March, or the movement was, focusing on black lives in particular at the moment, but also saying all racism, all injustice is absolutely wrong. So that's something that has my full support. It's something that I think as a territory we should look at ourselves, and we should constantly challenge ourselves. Some of those conversations are uncomfortable. You mentioned perceived discrimination earlier. Those are things we should talk about, and we should think, how do we want to be as a territory? How do we get our strengths? And how do we stand up for what's right and call out what is wrong in particular? In terms of you mentioned the legacy of slavery. That was absolutely horrific and disgusting period in history. There's no other way to say it. It was a horrific time in history. Different companies, as you've mentioned, a couple of them, themselves are reflecting on that and what it means, and it's right that they put out what they feel is appropriate on it. From my perspective, it's something that is just abhorrent, that there was a period in history where people were treated anything less than people, in fact a lot less than people. And I think that is important that we say that. It was an abhorrent time in history, and it's important that we remember that, and also then that we keep on championing and challenging any inch that is given where people are treated anything less than people today as well.
Do you think the apology is enough, Mr. Jaspert?
The apology from the companies, that's for them to talk about. I think it's an issue that is important. I think in terms of recognising the injustice of the past, but then thinking how do we build a more just world for the future, I think is an important dialogue to have.
All right. You did mention that you attended the Black Lives Matter movement right here in the BVI, and I have to ask, because a lot of persons spoke out against a lot of ways that they think it continues to manifest right here in the BVI as we live, as we speak, as of right now. Do you agree with those sentiments?
So as always, there's lots of different views expressed. I do agree with the sentiments that many expressed there, and I listened, I spoke to many people, and it was for me hearing different stories and different examples of how people have felt discriminated against or felt vulnerable. I was struck by one of the speakers, and this is an experience I haven't had. I haven't, to be honest, I haven't walked down an area and felt threatened when, in America for example, one of the stories, felt threatened when the police come and start questioning. So it's important that we hear, we listen, and that helps build understanding of it. So I think it's a very good thing that we look ourselves. This was partly solidarity with America, but also, I think, also help us to look at our own potential biases, our own potential injustices, our own potential discrimination in the territory as well. And every single day, what are we going to do? And how do we ensure that we are creating a more just and fair society?
All right. I know the BVI specifically is at a very critical juncture as it relates to our economy and how do we reboot and also build a greater autonomy. And one of the things that keeps coming up is constitutional reform or review. Do you think we are at a point in our history where we are ready for some type of constitutional review?
Yes, I do. I think it's a good thing. I think we should always, as a territory, keep on thinking, how do we go forward? How do we want to develop more? And what's the relationship with the United Kingdom? I always say when I started off as governor, whenever I start a job, I like to write my handover note to my successor. It's my little tip to guide me on what do I want to achieve. And my handover note to my successor is quite simple. It essentially says you should have less to do than I had to do, because the territory should be developing more, developing economically, developing socially, developing in a more just way on those issues we just talked about as well, and becoming more self-determining in the way that it wishes to. There's things I think we need to do ourselves. It's not just about constitutional review. That structures the dialogue between the United Kingdom and the BVI and structures the relationship between the United Kingdom and the BVI. But there's also things we can do ourselves to say we're going to operate at the highest level. We don't need necessarily other structures to do that. We talked earlier about, are we operating at the highest levels of good governance, of accountability, of transparency, of how we spend public money, of how we hold ourselves to account, how we have the strongest institutions and the checks and balances that you need in a democratic society. So I think these are good debates. There's things we can do in BVI, and it's good to have that debate with the United Kingdom as well about what does a constitution review look like.
I know we've been doing some great work in the territory as it relates to the environment, more specifically with the stony coral disease. I know you want to shed some light on that, so I'm going to give you that opportunity.
Thank you. Well, the environment is something that's really close to my heart, and here we live in an absolutely beautiful, beautiful place where our top asset is our people, but our second top asset, I think, is our incredible natural world around us. So this is something that I'm very pleased, and the Minister of Natural Resources, Labour and Immigration has taken forward a lot of work on protecting our environment. It's something I'm very keen to support. And also look at how do we ensure that we leave the BVI in a better place, not just for ourselves, but for our next generation as well. This is a global challenge, but here, what are we really going to do that? I went out just last week to look at a concerning area, which is called stony coral disease, which is coming in to the territory, sadly. This is the disease that affects our corals. This is something we can take action on, and I'm pleased we've got a small bit of UK grant to help support action to tackle this, to try and treat the disease and prevent it spreading into our waters. But I hope it's something that across the whole of BVI we can think about how do we keep on improving how we steward and pass on to the next generation one of our most important assets, which is our incredible natural environment.
All right, I know your office, Governor Jaspert, and the government are, of course, two key entities to ensuring that the BVI moves forward. And at this point, we can all agree that unity is paramount. The public is of the opinion that there has been a strain on the relationship between the governor's office and the government. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I agree very much with the need for unity and partnership. In any relationship, there will be areas that people agree on and disagree on, and that's healthy. That's what is a strength, that there's debate, that there's discussion, and there's movement to move the territory forward. All that drives me and all that drives my office and the only mandate I have is to deliver for the people of the territory. That's the only reason why I get up in the morning. That's the only reason why my office goes to work, is to deliver and make improvements for the people of the territory. So that's a basis for a strong partnership. There's a lot of noise. That noise rises up sometimes, but for me, the most important thing, I won't be diverted at all from supporting the people of the territory and having discussions about how do we take the territory forward to be even better than it is today.
Is a code of conduct for the governor, is that necessary?
Well, governors are, everybody in public life should be accountable. Everyone should be open, transparent about what they do. Everyone should be open to questioning, whoever you are, and I think that's important. Governors as a governor, I'm covered by a code of conduct already. There's what's called the UK Public Service Code. It's similar in a way to our code here, which we around the values around how the public service operate in terms of integrity, in terms of impartiality, etc. So those things are there, and that whilst the driver is how do we deliver for the people of the BVI, the how, in terms of the how do you do it, I do it in a way that is in line with the code that exists already. That's something I think we should take out wider. We're working on public service codes as well, and I hope that we get progress on a ministerial code. The previous government, just before they left office, agreed in principle to a ministerial code back in the beginning of 2019. I hope this is something that can be taken forward. The Premier said he intends to, and I hope this is something that we can get in place so everybody has clear standards, and then most importantly, it's for the public to hold, and the media as well.
Yes.
Your good selves and the excellent job that you do, to hold to account and to shine a spotlight, and to maybe not everyone agrees, but getting people to answer questions, to be transparent, to be accountable, and to explain is an important part of a democratic society.
And that is a quality we hold very dearly here at 284 Media indeed. Governor Jaspert, as we prepare to wrap up, we do know that we are in the midst of hurricane season. We have just about 60 named storms, I think an indication of at least 4 of them projected to be major hurricanes. What do you want to say to the BVI? I know we are here, but persons are still in preparation mode. What should we know as a territory?
Well, you're right. We're in hurricane season. We're also in hurricane season dealing with COVID-19. So we've got to be realistic and honest with ourselves about this season. It is an above average season. Now, we shouldn't be panicking. We know we have one of the best disaster management teams in the region. We know, sadly, we're tried and tested on how we respond to these storms. But it is a message for everybody to think through now. Are you prepared for yourself, your family? Think through your business, are you prepared? Think through your community, are you prepared? Think through how can you help others who may be less able to be prepared as well, because we don't want to be doing this at short notice. We want everybody to be thinking ahead. Yesterday, for example, my office, we tested our satellite communication system. Now you kind of think, is this immediately necessary to do? But yes, it is. We should, okay, we have a satellite communication system. Not everyone will have that. But what is your own preparations that you need to make to ensure that you're ready should we have, and obviously we pray we don't, but should we have a storm coming towards us? We also, as a government and the Department of Disaster Management, are undertaking the readiness assessment, which we do every year, to look at all of the areas to ensure that we're as ready as possible, looking at shelters, where we're also getting assessments of how do we do shelters with safe distancing and the COVID-19 approaches as well, and then looking at other areas of the public service to see how do we respond in a COVID era as well. So the government is doing preparations, but important message for everybody listening. The responsibility to keep yourself safe starts first with you. It starts with you to protect yourself, your family, your community. Government will do what it will do, but everybody themselves needs to think through, are they prepared and are they ready as we go into this season?
All right, Governor Jaspert, we've covered quite a number of topics today. I'm very grateful to be able to have this conversation and bring some much needed clarity to a lot of these things that we're dealing with here in the British Virgin Islands. But as we be prepared to wrap up, what would you like to say, of course, on behalf of the Governor's Office and yourself to the BVI?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on this morning. It's a delight to be here. We've covered a lot of ground. Just to, in a way, there's one thing more on an emotional level, which I know we haven't really talked about. We talked about some of the practical issues at the moment, but this is a challenging time.
Yes.
A very challenging time in the territory, and we for everybody, and for public servants, I should applaud their work, that they have been working incredibly hard, our HEOC team, our health services, our police officers, right across the public service, adapting to deal with how do we respond to deal with the challenges of COVID-19. So thank you to everybody who's been involved in that. Thank you also to members of the public. We would not be here if you hadn't supported what we've been doing as a government. And when we look around the world, we had to take some difficult decisions to lock down, to shut down, but that has worked and got us to the point we're at because of members of the public making those sacrifices, businesses making those sacrifices. And I don't underestimate how difficult that must have been, but thank you for that. But it is also a time where we are challenged. We're all stressed, to be honest. We're all probably tired.
Yes.
And we've got a hurricane season coming up. So going back to what we said earlier, this is a time, let's dig deep, BVI, and let's think this is the time, if ever, where we come together as a community. We don't divide along any lines, whatever they are, that people draw lines and try to create division in society. This is the time we come together, support each other, stay united and be the best of the BVI that I know we can. And I'm confident, I've seen it before, and even in the brief time that I've been in BVI, I've seen how amazing the people of the British Virgin Islands are. So my message really is the Governor's Office is there to support and work on behalf of the people of the territory, and that will always drive us, but I am lifted up and I hope we all stay united, supportive and strong as we go through what is a challenging period for everybody. So thank you.
You're welcome. And we want to thank you, Governor Jaspert. I know as one of our leading officials, it must not be an easy task to champion such a difficult stage. COVID-19, like you said, has crippled the world over, including here in the British Virgin Islands, and also dealing with hurricane season and all the other issues, myriad of issues that we're trying to address locally. And we do want to applaud not just yourself, but your office as well for the stalwart leadership you continue to deliver. And of course, thank you so much for being here today, because we really appreciate being able to tap in and have the necessary conversations. Of course, having the questions of the public answered within our ability to have this conversation. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All right, viewers, that was Governor Jaspert of the British Virgin Islands talking all things BVI Airways, racism, as well as our response to COVID-19 and so much more. We want to thank you once again for joining us and remind you to tune in tonight, that is 6 p.m. for our live 284 News cast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Homegrown.
And initiate sequence.
Penetrate this man's soul with my heart. What? Watch and learn.
Sir?
Homegrown.
There's a world full of other trolls. How different can they be?
Are we in Florida?
Oh my god.